I think this is obviously true. I mean, Roosevelt's Secretary of the Treasury for almost the entirety of his administration was Henry Morgenthau Jr., who was not exactly an intellectual, but he was very educated, very comfortable around intellectual folks, and of course, ultimately became the host for Keynes's most important visit to the Bretton Woods. Conference. Contrast that with his successor in the Truman administration, who was Fred Vinson, who was the Kentuckian who, when Keynes came over to talk to him about what needed to be done next, he said, well, maybe so, Lord Keynes, maybe so, but that's not how we see it down where I'm come from, right? So it was not interested, right, in Keynes the way that the Roosevelt folks had been. And the Truman administration was generally like that. It was sort of staffed with fixers. And again, it's hard to say exactly. I mean, it's tempting to give the same answer that I gave Clarence a few minutes ago. This is partly personality. Academics, I think, know this as well as anyone else. It's very uncomfortable being around somebody who's smarter than you are, especially if you think of yourself as pretty smart. And it takes somebody who is very confident and comfortable with himself, like Franklin Roosevelt, who doesn't care that you're smarter than he is, right, but who can derive value from what you have to say, right, to deal with a cast of characters like this one. Whereas somebody who's maybe a little bit more insecure, like Harry S. Truman, who always felt that he was stepping into shoes that were too big for him, right, was not quite as comfortable around folks like that. I mean, you see the same kind of transition from Kennedy to Johnson in terms of personality and their relationship to those kinds of advisors. So I do think it's partly personality. It's also sort of structural. I mean, again, Truman had been a senator. He had been, sort of embedded in the Pendergast machine, right, back in Missouri. Those were his folks, right, the kinds of the fixers and the makers and the politicos. And Roosevelt came from a very different background. He had been in touch with the progressives in New York and those folks who were reformers and intellectuals had long had his ear while he was governor, right? When he had polio, he spent a long time just reading books by himself. He was fairly comfortable with a wider variety of people, I think.